After throwing on my wetsuit, mask and snorkel, and diving into Tasmania's fresh tannin-stained waters, I came across what would be the greatest discovery of my prospecting career.
Nobody had set foot on this ground for more than a century. The old miners had long since packed up and left. The records were closed, and every official survey repeated the same conclusion. The gold was gone. Time to move on. So when a group known as the Tassie Boys arrived and began sweeping detectors over land written off before 1900, no one expected much. But abandoned ground has a way of holding secrets most people never discover. This is a story of second chances. Their plan was straightforward. Reach one of Tasmania's most remote rivers and explore terrain untouched since the original miners left over 100 years ago. Those early miners weren't wrong. There was gold here. They just underestimated how much they had actually recovered. The Tassie Boys came because they believed there was more. They pushed deep into isolated Tasmanian bushland that few would dare to enter, searching areas that experts had long declared barren. And then something remarkable happened. Back in the mid-1800s, gold fever swept across the Australian colonies, reshaping landscapes and drawing thousands into harsh, unforgiving terrain. Tasmania had its own rush, with miners flooding river valleys and steep mountain gullies, chasing gold through cold, wet, and brutal conditions. They took what they could reach, and then they left. Not because the gold was gone, but because their tools had limits. The miners of that era worked with what they had. Basic tools, sharp eyes, and crude processing methods. They could extract high-grade gold, but anything beyond their technological reach remained hidden. Gold buried deeper, locked in quartz, or mixed within mineralized rock often went unnoticed, or was discarded entirely. What remains in these hills isn't emptiness. It's gold that 19th century technology simply couldn't detect. That's the question the Tassie Boys set out to answer. Not whether gold once existed here, but whether any still remains. Their approach isn't based on luck. It begins weeks before they ever step into the field. They dig through historical mining records, old survey maps, and geological reports, documents that are publicly available but rarely examined. These records reveal where miners worked, what they found, and most importantly, where they stopped. That stopping point is key. Miners only dug where gold was already present. If they abandoned a site, it wasn't always because it was exhausted. It was often because their methods couldn't go further. The Tassie Boys focus on these gaps, asking one critical question. Where did the work end before the gold truly ran out? More often than not, the answer is sooner than expected. Early miners recovered most of the easily visible gold, but significant amounts were left behind, in low-grade material, beneath rocks, or in quartz that appeared worthless at the time. If they couldn't see it, they couldn't collect it. What they called empty ground wasn't empty at all. Today, the Tassie Boys head into the field, equipped with advanced metal detectors, capable of picking up tiny nuggets buried deep beneath the surface, technology that would have seemed like magic in the 1800s. Combined with careful research and systematic search patterns, they can access gold that has remained untouched for over a century. They arrive at their site before sunrise. The bush has reclaimed most traces of past activity. There are no active mining operations, no recent disturbances, just subtle clues left behind for those who know how to read the land. As they move deeper into the gully, the track fades away, replaced by instinct, navigation skills, and an understanding of terrain shaped by geological knowledge. They look for drainage lines, natural rises, and places where gold-bearing quartz veins may have once surfaced. The forest is quiet. Any remaining traces of human activity are faint, but they're there. A straight depression that doesn't belong in nature. A barely visible mound of earth where miners once dumped waste. Fragments of quartz scattered across the ground, even though the original vein is long gone. These are the clues that guide them. Before even turning on their detectors, they study the geology. Near the creek lies ironstone, dense, heavy, stained with deep orange and brown tones. It's a sign of ancient mineral activity, where superheated water once flowed through underground faults, depositing minerals as it cooled. Gold was part of that process. It became trapped in quartz, and over millions of years, as the rock weathered and iron minerals oxidized, some of that gold was released. While some remained locked away in discarded stone, the old miners left behind. What they missed is still here, waiting. A line of quartz runs clearly along the hillside, bright, milky white with patches of iron staining. To a trained eye, it stands out immediately and tells an important story. The vein cuts diagonally across the slope, following the fault line that formed it. This is exactly the kind of rock formation that reef miners in the 1800s were skilled at spotting. It's no coincidence that the trench above follows the same path. Over 150 years ago, someone stood in this exact spot, noticed the same signs, and began digging. The remains of their work are still visible today. Mullock heaps, piles of discarded rock, sit scattered along the hillside, now partly covered in moss and overgrown with ferns. Even so, their shape and purpose are unmistakable. These piles were created as miners sorted through blasted rock, tossing aside anything that didn't appear valuable at the time. Today, those same heaps are ideal ground for metal detecting. Back then, miners worked quickly, relying on sight and instinct. If a rock didn't show visible gold, it was thrown aside. But that meant plenty was missed. Gold hidden beneath rocks, fine particles invisible to the naked eye, or gold locked inside quartz that looked worthless. All of it ended up in these waste piles, untouched ever since, waiting for modern tools to uncover it. The Tassie Boys put on their headphones and begin scanning. This is where the real work starts. The first signal seems promising. About 8 inches down, the detector picks up something solid. But once uncovered, it turns out to be a corroded nail. It gets tossed onto a growing pile of scrap metal beside the hole. That's the reality of gold prospecting in old mining areas. Every signal has to be dug. The detector can't tell the difference between a gold nugget and a piece of rusted wire. It only indicates that metal is present. The only way to know is to dig it up. The ground is full of old debris, nails, bolts, bits of lead, and broken tools left behind over a century ago. Each signal carries a hint of possibility until proven otherwise. And the Tassie Boys check every single one. There are no shortcuts here. Skipping a signal out of fatigue or impatience could mean missing gold. So they stick to a strict routine. Sweep the coil, hear the tone, mark the spot, dig carefully, check the soil and the hole, recover the object, identify it, fill the hole, and move on. They repeat this process dozens of times, often ending up with nothing more than rusted scrap. Partway through the morning, their handheld pinpointer stops working properly, likely due to the cold and damp conditions. Without it, the job becomes slower and more difficult. They have to rely on the main detector, carefully removing small amounts of soil and checking repeatedly to narrow down each signal. It takes twice as long. When they finally recover the next target, it's just a tiny piece of rusted metal. A brief moment of disappointment, then they fill the hole and continue. The next signal, a small piece of lead. After that, an old bolt buried deep, likely once part of a wooden structure that has long since rotted away. Then more nails, scrap fragments, nothing valuable. Yet, they photograph each find, not out of sentiment, but as part of their method. Every item tells a story about how the site was worked in the past. As they move along the lower edge of a mullock heap, the ground becomes uneven and overgrown. Thick grass and ferns cover what was once disturbed soil. It's rough terrain, easy to twist an ankle. The cold seeps in whenever they stop, so they keep moving. And with each signal, the same question lingers. Could this be the one? Deeper into the site, they reach the heart of the old workings, the reef itself. A line of quartz-rich rock still cuts through the hillside, marking the original source of the gold. The trench alongside it has aged and softened over time, its edges slumping and its base filled with layers of leaves. But its purpose is still clear. Miners once followed this vein by hand, using basic tools like steel rods and hammers, extracting ore bit by bit. The gold they found made the effort worthwhile. The gold they missed remained hidden, because they didn't know it was there. Standing beside the trench, you can trace the path of the quartz vein. Sections have been cut through and removed. The miners who worked here were skilled. They found the reef, followed it, and recovered much of the obvious gold before moving on. What they left behind stretches along both sides of the trench. Heaps of discarded rock, sorted quickly and thrown aside when no gold was visible. In formations like this, gold appears in two main forms. The first is free gold, small nuggets or particles separated from the surrounding rock. These are easy for a detector to find because they produce clear, consistent signals. The second is gold still trapped inside quartz. This type is invisible to detectors and can only be recovered by crushing the rock. The Tassie Boys are searching for the first type, free gold, and the old mullock heaps are the most likely place to find it. But so far, after hours of searching, every signal has led to scrap metal, nails, rusted fragments, and other remnants of past mining activity. It's proof that people once worked here, but not the proof they're hoping for. Still, they keep going. They expand their search towards the creek, where over time, rain and erosion may have carried gold down from the reef. In these lower areas, gold can settle into cracks and natural traps in the bedrock, waiting quietly for someone to find it. The work continues. They give the creek a thorough, methodical search, sweeping the detector low over smooth river stones and along the edges where slower moving water tends to drop heavier material like gold. Still nothing. So they return to the mullock heaps and change their approach. This time, they scan across the piles at a different angle, crossing their earlier paths to cover ground they might have missed. A signal comes through. It's just a piece of lead shot. Another signal follows about 20 minutes later. It turns out to be a bent nail. The tone is convincing enough that a less experienced person might spend extra time chasing it, but the Tassie Boys recognize the sound immediately. They recover it in minutes and move on, because the key is simple: keep going. Then, on a final pass along the lower edge of the main mullock heap, something changes. The detector gives off a tone that stands out. It's not the dull, shallow hit of surface iron, and not the scratchy signal of corroded scrap. This one is clean, sharp, and consistent. It's coming from deeper down, below the layer of rubbish that's dominated the entire day. They don't rush. An experienced prospector checks a signal multiple times before committing. Each pass confirms it, steady, repeatable, and promising. They begin to dig carefully, removing soil in small, controlled amounts, scanning constantly to track the target. The hole gets deeper, going past the usual layer of junk. At first, the signal stays in the ground. Then it shifts into the loose soil they've dug out. And there it is. In a small clump of dense clay, something catches the light, a flash of rich yellow. Gold. The color is unmistakable, bright, deep, and natural against the soil. Once you've seen it in real conditions, there's no confusing it. It's a tiny piece, a picker or small nugget, weighing less than a gram. Its rough, uneven shape shows it hasn't traveled far. This is gold that likely came from nearby quartz, moved only slightly over time, and ended up in the mullock pile, discarded unknowingly by a miner long ago. It's small, but it changes everything, because a find like this proves something important. The ground still holds gold. In the right place, even a tiny piece matters more than a large find somewhere else. This nugget confirms that the area isn't worked out. The old miners didn't get it all, not because they lacked skill, but because their tools had limits. This piece simply sat beyond what they could detect. Modern technology changes that. With today's detectors, the Tassie Boys can find what miners in the 1800s couldn't. And this discovery validates everything: the research, the maps, the geological understanding, and the decision to come here. Their method works. The ground still produces. And where there's one piece of gold, there's usually more. Gold in reef systems rarely appears alone. It tends to occur in clusters, linked to structural features like faults, bends, or zones where mineralization is stronger. Finding one piece confirms they're searching in the right place, and that more could be nearby, possibly within reach already. Now the focus sharpens. Every rock becomes a possibility. They keep searching. Because what the Tassie Boys understand, Something maps alone can't show is that Tasmania's goldfields are still far from fully explored. The miners of the 19th century worked without modern detectors, without advanced geological knowledge, and without the benefit of generations of research. They found what they could see and reach. They left what they couldn't. Historical records still exist. Old mining reports, survey maps, and geological notes stored in public archives, rarely studied in detail. These documents don't just show where gold was found. They reveal where miners stopped working. And that detail matters. They didn't always stop because the gold ran out. Often they stopped because continuing wasn't profitable with the tools they had. That's a crucial difference, and it points directly to areas that may still hold gold today. The Tassie Boys rely on this insight. Before heading out, they study these records carefully, comparing old reports with geological maps. They look for patterns, places where mining activity was strong but ended suddenly. Not areas that slowly faded out, but ones where work stopped abruptly. Those are the places worth revisiting. The detector is just the final step in a much larger process, one that begins with research and leads to the field. And what maps don't show is just as important as what they do. Not where the gold is, but where people stopped looking. The land they're working has everything: documented mining history, favorable geology, and now confirmed gold. The conclusion is clear. Abandoned ground doesn't mean empty ground, and sometimes all it takes to prove that is a single small piece of gold, lying unnoticed in a pile of discarded rock for over 100 years, waiting for the right tool to finally bring it to light. Gold prospecting in Tasmania isn't for people who want quick results or easy wins. It takes patience, preparation, and a willingness to work through tough conditions. The terrain is demanding, the weather can be unforgiving, and most of the signals you dig turn out to be junk. When gold does show up, it's usually small and earned only after hours of careful, methodical effort. But the opportunity is real. The land is still there. The history is well documented. The geology points to specific areas worth exploring. And the old records clearly show where miners stopped working. Not always because the gold was gone, but because they had reached the limits of what they could do at the time. What today proved is simple. The gold didn't all leave with the miners who walked away all those years ago. The Tassie Boys will be back. Now they know there's more out there. And somewhere in that quiet Tasmanian bush, more gold is still waiting to be found. If you're interested in seeing what can be uncovered in places most people wouldn't even think to search, stay tuned for the next trip. It's already in the works, and the results could be even better. What do you think? Is there still gold left in Tasmania's abandoned workings, or did the early miners clear it all out? Please subscribe to the Timefold channel and don't forget to like.